To understand the transformative work Living Cities is leading, we should begin with the Closing the Gaps Network, or as we fondly call it, the CTG Network. Born from a vision to address systemic inequities in wealth and opportunity, the network is a growing coalition of local government leaders, city officials, and community organizations dedicated to advancing inclusive wealth-building strategies. The Closing the Gaps Network began as an evolution of Living Cities' history of place-based work to close gaps in income and wealth. Prior to the Closing the Gaps Network, most of Living Cities' initiatives had been short-term, partnering with cities around topic-specific initiatives for only 1 or 2 years. And we learned it takes a deeper investment in time, support, and relationship building to achieve systemic changes. Thus, the CTG Network was launched to stay a long-term initiative that convenes cities that Living Cities had established relationships with and had demonstrated their commitment to closing the racial wealth and income gaps. Today, the Closing the Gaps Network spans 24 cities across the U.S., with an ambitious goal to grow to 30 cities by the summer of 2025. At its core, the network exists to break down systemic barriers and create sustainable, long-lasting pathways to economic equity for Black, Latino, and Indigenous communities. To bring this vision to life, Living Cities facilitates 2 major cohort initiatives with cities that are in the network: Breaking Barriers to Business, or what we affectionately call B3, and the Closing the Gaps cohort, or the CTG cohort. These efforts target systemic challenges in business and homeownership and provide participating cities with catalytic grants, expert guidance, and tailored technical assistance. Let's start with Breaking Barriers to Business. In partnership with the Truist Foundation and Main Street America, this initiative focuses on empowering small businesses owned by people of color in 5 cities: Atlanta, Charlotte, Memphis, Nashville, and Miami. These cities are currently in the implementation phase, working to dismantle systemic obstacles between local government agencies and community-based organizations to ensure entrepreneurs of color have access to the knowledge and financial resources needed to thrive. The CTG cohort, supported by Wells Fargo and Citi Foundation, operates in Austin, Albuquerque, Memphis, Minneapolis, Rochester, and St. Paul. This initiative takes a focused approach to expanding wealth-building opportunities through both business and home ownership. These efforts are in the evaluation phase, using stories of impact to encourage replication in cities across the broader network. But what truly sets these initiatives apart is their data-driven and community-centered approach. Participating cities work collaboratively with local stakeholders such as local nonprofits and businesses, city departments, chambers of commerce, and so on, to ensure that their strategies address real systemic barriers and create tangible opportunities for residents to build generational wealth. As of today, St. Paul has leveraged Living Cities support to develop innovative financial vehicles to help business owners transition into cooperative ownership models and redress a legacy of displacement in the city's historically Black neighborhood. Other cities like Miami and Charlotte have already begun using our catalytic investments to help business owners of color in key commercial corridors. I'm your host, Justin Charles, and you're listening to Live with Living Cities. In today's episode, we'll explore how the Closing the Gaps Network, born out of a transformative period, has become a force for change. So, how does all of this connect to the year of reckoning and Living Cities' broader mission to confront systemic racism? Let's go back to 2020, a year that changed everything. 2020 began with echoes of division and unrest, a storm brewing beneath the surface. By January, a new chapter of American history was unfolding, a year that would push our nation to its breaking point. Across the country, the COVID-19 pandemic raged, claiming millions of lives and triggering nationwide lockdowns. The first impeachment of President Trump brought new tensions to an already fragile nation. Communities were reeling, unsure of what might come next. But as these seismic shifts continued, something else was happening. Something that would spark a reckoning with America's deepest wound. On May 25th, George Floyd was murdered by Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin, a killing that was captured on camera and watched by millions. The world was horrified, angered, and finally moved to action. Protests filled streets across the globe and call for racial justice reached a fever pitch. For living cities, this marked a pivotal moment, a time when the urgent need to confront the lasting effects of systemic racism became clearer than ever. In early 2020, we had already embarked on the Year of Reckoning, a year-long deep dive to help leaders from our newly created Closing the Gaps network, Albuquerque, Austin, Memphis, Rochester, St. Paul, and Minneapolis, increased their racial equity awareness to ultimately address the racial inequities that remain deeply woven into the fabric of our society. Then, George Floyd was murdered by a police officer in Minneapolis, one of the Closing the Gaps network cities. This horrific event not only shook the world, but also deeply galvanized the work around the Year of Reckoning. What began as a commitment to racial equity earlier that year was now invigorated by a global call to action, aligning Living Cities' efforts with a national and international reckoning on race and justice. Conversations that were once focused on a handful of cities suddenly became a national dialogue about race, exclusion, and equity. And Living Cities was ready. So, what exactly did the Year of Reckoning do? Living Cities granted over $3.2 million to support these cities in implementing groundbreaking initiatives. These weren't just theoretical exercises. These were real community-driven solutions to some of the biggest issues facing Black, Hispanic, Indigenous, Asian American, Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander communities, and individuals from other historically marginalized populations today. Here are a few of the key initiatives. Cities worked to create community-owned land trust models, giving local residents control over how land is developed in their communities. They developed city land to expand affordable housing options, particularly for Native and Black residents. New models of co-ownership for homes and businesses were designed by and for historically marginalized populations. Cities invested in community-based business incubators, which are local organizations that support the growth of new businesses through efforts like mentorship, network expansion, funding, etc., to help launch and grow businesses owned by historically marginalized populations. And they provided financial support to families seeking home ownership, including those who had been pushed out by policies of racial segregation and urban renewal, descendants of those displaced residents. This wasn't just about checking boxes. This was about rethinking how cities serve their communities and how they can intentionally repair some of the harms caused by systemic racism. The real power of the Year of Reckoning came from working with communities, not just for them. The 6 cities involved received deep support and technical assistance, starting with foundational Undoing Racism, racial equity training from the People's Institute for Survival and beyond. These representatives also learned how to gather and analyze current data about homeownership and entrepreneurship in historically marginalized communities, and how to understand the current landscape. They also gathered input and feedback from residents on the challenges and opportunities for expanding those communities' homeownership and business ownership in their cities, which ultimately informed their work. By confronting their own pasts and listening to the voices of the people who know their cities best, these local governments are transforming their policies in ways that create more opportunities for homeownership, business ownership, and generational wealth building for people of color. Now, what's been the impact of the Year of Reckoning? In a word, transformative. These cities have taken the feedback they've received from community members and used it to inform their work plans moving forward. What we're seeing now is the implementation of strategies that prioritize racial equity in housing and business ownership, something that was missing from city programs for decades. The results? Cities like St. Paul and Memphis have already begun shifting power and resources back to the communities that were historically excluded. Affordable housing is being developed with direct community input. New pathways for homeownership in historically marginalized populations are being carved out. And cities are learning to reflect on their own histories, recognizing how past decisions are still impacting their residents today. This isn't about short-term wins. It's about building a foundation for a more equitable future. The Year of Reckoning was just the beginning. Over the next 3 years, these cities will continue implementing their strategies, deepening their relationships with the communities they serve, and holding themselves accountable for creating real, lasting change.
One of the most optimistic things that we saw after the year of reckoning post-George Floyd is we saw that across the country, people believed that we as a nation could do better than that. We saw a horrific public lynching, and we were forced to watch it because we were home during the pandemic and we couldn't avoid seeing it. And Americans pretty much said, we can do better than that, and we will do better than that. Throughout the pandemic, everyone had crises. City after city had to really focus in on taking care of their people. And that's exactly what you do in cities. You live proximately with your neighbors, and you care about what's happening to your neighbors once you recognize them as your neighbors. What we've been able to do, and what we saw cities do, is stay the course, stay together, come together virtually, but also share the things that they were working through. In real time, cities have to solve problems. In real time, cities have to deal with snow removal, to crime, to housing, to deep entrenched poverty. Cities don't have time to dither. So our goal is always to try to bring together both city leaders, both elected and appointed, community leaders, and other stakeholders in cities, whether that be philanthropy, the investment community, to bring them together and to create the kind of safe space where they can have real talk on how they're solving real problems. We think that's key for how we move together and how we build the economy of the future. The economy we deserve today, but we don't have today. We certainly know that the children who are born this year will inherit a multiracial, multi-ethnic plurality in 2045. We start building the economy for the children born today, and cities are key to that.
And the work doesn't stop there. We also focus on cross-city learning communities, creating spaces where cities can share what's working, what's not, and how to adapt innovative solutions to their own context. The idea is simple. No city should have to start from scratch when we have the collective knowledge and experience to learn from each other. This is how system change happens. It's local, it's collaborative, and it's rooted in equity. Thanks for joining us today on Live with Living Cities. We're always thrilled to have you as part of these essential conversations about building a just and equitable society. Your time, curiosity, and commitment to change mean a lot, and we can't wait to have you back for our next episode. If you'd like to get involved in our work, visit our website at livingcities.org to learn more about the programs in the cities we're working with. Subscribe to this podcast to hear more stories from the front lines of change, and please, share this episode with others who care about closing the racial wealth gap and building a more equitable future for all. We'd also love to hear from organizations interested in becoming members of Living Cities. If your organization would like to join our coalition of changemakers, reach out to us at lcinfo@livingcities.org. That's LCINFO@livingcities.org with the subject line, Member. And if you're interested in having your city become a strategic partner and member of the Closing the Gaps Network, reach out to us at lcinfo, that's LCINFO, @livingcities.org with the subject line, CTG Network. And before we wrap up, we want to extend a huge thank you to the incredible organizations that make this work possible. Living Cities is powered by a coalition of leaders and changemakers whose dedication and support drive our mission forward. So special thank you to the Annie E. Casey Foundation, Cerdna Foundation, Truist Foundation, Citi Foundation, Deutsche Bank, the Gates Foundation, McKnight Foundation, MacArthur Foundation, the JPB Foundation, Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, the M&T Charitable Foundation, the Prudential Foundation, Melville Charitable Trust, MetLife Foundation, Morgan Stanley, W.K. Kellogg Foundation, the Kresge Foundation, and the Ewing Marion Kaufman Foundation. We're honored to work alongside you in the movement to close the racial wealth gap and create lasting impact in communities across the country. Thanks again, everyone, for tuning in. Until next time, stay engaged, stay inspired, and let's keep working together toward a future where equity is a reality for all. I'm Justin Charles, and this has been Live with Living Cities.